Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Tim Walz has coasted for years on the carefully polished image of being Minnesota nice, the smiling, handshake-ready governor with a folksy, aw-shucks persona. But when Megyn Kelly turns her spotlight on him, that easygoing mask crumbles instantly. She rips apart his carefully constructed facade, exposing contradictions, missteps, and opportunism that charm alone can no longer disguise. And instead of gently poking holes in his act, Kelly scorches through it with precision, leaving his so-called legacy wobbling like a fragile house of cards battered by the wind.
Walz is also out on the new media tour and trying to help her when he's not defending his comments on the Electoral College. And he sits down with Michael Strahan, who's the best thing ABC has going. And Strahan actually asks him about his many, many lies. There's a much longer list than actually came up, but he did raise it to his credit. Here's how that went.
Tim Walz has long packaged himself as the everyman governor, the corn-fed Midwestern dad who just happens to run a state, wrapping himself tightly in that Minnesota nice costume, the kind of guy you'd expect to see at a potluck with a casserole in hand and a story about his high school football days. But when Megyn Kelly takes aim, that whole act collapses faster than a lawn chair in a windstorm, because beneath the soft smile and gentle tones is a politician who has played every side of the fence, and Kelly makes sure not a single plank of that fence is left standing.
Said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in school.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Megyn Kelly doesn't just laugh at Tim Walz's contradictions. She shines a glaring spotlight on them, like a searchlight catching a raccoon in the backyard. Walz has branded himself as the steady hand of the Midwest. But the reality is a man juggling policies, promising one thing to one crowd while whispering the opposite to another. And Kelly isn't fooled for a second by the Minnesota nice routine. To her, Walz isn't a leader at all. He's the human equivalent of beige wallpaper, bland, unoriginal, and forgettable, until you notice how badly he clashes with everything around him.
Statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong.
Yeah.
But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools.
The problem with Tim Walz's brand of leadership is that it thrives on pretending problems don't exist until they smack him right in the face. When crime rates climb, he shrugs and tosses out a hollow platitude about community values. When education falters, he pops into a classroom for a quick photo op, nodding along like a smile alone will solve everything, then vanishes while real results remain as rare as a Minnesota summer, lasting more than 2 weeks. Megyn Kelly tears into this routine, showing how Walz has turned governing into little more than posing near problems instead of actually fixing them.
Fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior, which was just his latest in a series of lies. The reason he resorted to, "I'm a knucklehead," was he got confronted with his latest lie.
It isn't just Tim Walz's lack of substance that Megyn Kelly skewers. It's the glaring contradictions that practically write themselves. He presents himself as a champion of small-town values, yet his policies often echo the wish lists of big-city bureaucrats. And while he preaches about freedom and responsibility, he's quick to cheer on government overreach whenever it benefits his political allies. Kelly exposes the truth with precision. Walz isn't a steady leader, but a political chameleon, shifting his colors depending on who's watching. And in doing so, she unmasks a governor who is more about survival than conviction.
I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war, did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record.
What truly sets Megyn Kelly's takedown ablaze is when she dives into Tim Walz's crisis management, where the cracks in his leadership split wide open. During the pandemic, he painted himself as the guardian of public safety, handing out mandates like candy on Halloween. Yet his mixed messages left people more confused than reassured, proving that calm doesn't equal effective. Off camera, his leadership was as chaotic as a garage sale in the rain, with rules changing daily, priorities flipping overnight, and excuses sounding like a student scrambling for why they forgot their homework. Instead of clarity, Minnesotans got chaos delivered with a friendly accent, and Kelly spares no mercy in exposing it.
It's been unearthed. There's a long list of them. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed. You know, whether you were in a place where hundreds of people are being massacred by their government when it happens. But he continues to try to say, like, oh, gee, I was just kind of confused. You know, that happened in May and I was there in August, but I guess I just imagined that I was there, whatever. So he got asked about that debate moment where he completely melted down.
Tim Walz's contradictions on policing and public safety pile up higher than ever, and Megyn Kelly makes sure every flaw is exposed. He talks tough on supporting law enforcement when cameras are rolling, but folds like a paper plate at a barbecue the moment progressive activists turn up the heat, leaving chaos to brew under his so-called watch. Kelly hammers him for ducking responsibility during social unrest, showing how his passive understanding didn't stop riots and his empathy never restored order. She mocks his governing style by comparing it to Minnesota winters, long, drawn out, and full of empty promises that spring is just around the corner, though spring never comes when it's needed most. Even his relatable stories about growing up in Nebraska or teaching high school feel more like political cosplay than genuine authenticity, proving his everyman act is just another costume.
Well, they're comparing this moment by Tim Walz to that because he looked so inept and like a faker, like he didn't belong there and he was trying to convince us of something that wasn't real as he decided to go pheasant hunting. And Charlie, you're a gun guy. You tell me whether this looked authentic to you. Here he is.
That's my theory. And it never fits quite right. Never fits quite right. Just not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400.
Megyn Kelly ridicules the idea that Tim Walz is still just one of us, pointing out that he's been trapped inside the political bubble so long, the only small town he remembers is the one his consultants invent for speeches. She slices apart his economic record with the same precision, showing how his so-called fiscal stewardship has been nothing but high taxes, bloated budgets, and underperforming services, a recipe for taxpayer frustration. It's like buying every shiny kitchen gadget only to discover you still can't cook a meal. And Kelly laughs off his national ambitions as pure delusion, comparing it to a man who struggles to run a lemonade stand, suddenly declaring he's ready to take over Starbucks. For her, Walz confuses photo ops with leadership and applause with results. And she leaves no doubt about how flimsy his image really is.
Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do. And now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak.
Megyn Kelly goes further, dismantling the illusion that Tim Walz is some kind of unifier, flipping the narrative his defenders cling to on its head. The only unity he inspires is when people across the political spectrum roll their eyes at his speeches. Democrats call him too cautious, Republicans label him too reckless, and independents see him as a man incapable of making a decisive move even if his life depended on it. The so-called unifier label isn't earned, it's ironic, because Walz has succeeded only in uniting people through disappointment, and in today's volatile political climate, mediocrity isn't harmless, it's dangerous. Kelly smashes the Minnesota nice facade to rubble, showing that Walz is anything but the calm, steady hand his supporters pretend he is.
Environment. And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being vice president of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it.
Okay, guys, I will submit to you that the American people are not dumb. And I would submit to you that the American people will look over "I'm friends with school shooters," which he said in that vice presidential debate, as him misspeaking. Everyone will give him that grace. But it's not going to work on this litany of other lies, because you don't misspeak over and over.
Tim Walz is a politician whose greatest skill is surviving criticism by looking pleasant while failing upward. And Megyn Kelly makes the audience see it with brutal clarity. Behind every warm grin and soft-spoken reply lies a career built not on vision, but on avoidance. And the very smile he thought was armor becomes a bullseye for Kelly's precision strikes. His entire strategy has relied on people forgetting, moving on, or not caring enough to dig deeper, as he repeats folksy slogans and banks on the short attention span of politics. But for all his speeches about accountability, his administration runs from scrutiny that's contagious. Tough questions get buried in bureaucracy, drowned in talking points, or delayed until the outrage fades. Kelly calls this exactly what it is. Not leadership, but a shell game. Painting over cracks with fresh white paint and hoping no one notices the damage spreading underneath.
On Wednesday in Pennsylvania, and here's how he handled it.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me, about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that thing with China. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands.
The cracks in Tim Walz's leadership only grow wider when you look at education, where he branded himself as the champion of Minnesota's future, yet test scores in reading and math have collapsed. Classrooms are struggling, parents are frustrated, teachers are exhausted, and Walz's solution is simply to pour more money into a broken system without demanding accountability or real results. Megyn Kelly zeroes in on the hypocrisy of promising opportunity for every child while delivering nothing but the status quo, proving that equity without outcomes is just expensive window dressing. And when it comes to the economy, supposedly his strong suit, Walz boasts of creating opportunity. But many Minnesotans feel trapped, barely treading water while being taxed into exhaustion. Kelly cuts through this contradiction like a knife, exposing a governor who confuses optics with outcomes and leaves his state spinning in circles.
On an instance there, proud of the service that I've done, proud to be a teacher in that classroom, proud to have been very public all these years and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial.
Well, but it's one of the things of trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him to even tell the truth about himself.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment.
The most devastating blows land when Megyn Kelly highlights Tim Walz's habit of following instead of leading, showing how he's mastered the art of waiting to see which way the wind blows before jumping in front and calling it courage. During the George Floyd protests, Walz stumbled for weeks, paralyzed between activists demanding sweeping change and citizens desperate for safety. And in the end, he disappointed both. Too soft for some, too harsh for others. Kelly calls it exactly what it is: indecision disguised as balance. And she reminds the public how schools stayed closed longer than necessary, businesses crumbled under drawn-out restrictions, and mental health suffered while Walz clung to caution until political pressure forced his hand. In her telling, his governorship isn't a story of vision but of fear, leaving ordinary families to pick up the pieces of his hesitation.